task ahead is to start installing these gunnels. These are 1.5 by 3/4 sapele that I've milled and scarfed into 2 long lengths per side. These are about 26 feet long on each side. The blanks, it's obviously longer than I need, but I've just left it like that for now. These will be installed in 2 sections. First, the section directly against the boat. I'll leave that to cure, and then I'll do the second part. So in the end, we'll have a 1.5 by 1.5 gunnel on here. It's going to follow these red marks that I laid out and have marked throughout the process. And the first layer is, it will be epoxied in place and held in place with temporary screws, which will probably penetrate into the interior, because in order to use screws that'll grab, they're going to have to be long enough. They're just 1.25 inch, but 1-inch screws would not go through, but I found they don't grab very well. And this is only 3/8 plywood, so there's not a lot of meat here. So I think the best approach is to just let the screws go where they may, and I will remove them once the epoxy's cured and just patch those holes on the inside. I'm going to get a few tools and supplies collected and laid out first, and then I'll get going on this installation. So to start, I've got a couple clamps at the aft end that I'll show you, and this wooden jaw clamp up here at the bow, because it's long enough to extend and grab this. And that's just to get this roughly in position. I didn't want the forward end just hanging off. So now that I've got it kind of supported, I'll go back to the aft end and clean that up a little bit and start fastening this in place and moving my way forward. At the aft end here, it's lined up with the top of the hull where I cut it. That's right where it's supposed to be. And from there we start following these red marks. And it's obviously not exactly where it needs to be at the moment, but it's roughly supported and bent in the way it needs to, and I'll just start putting some screws in and see where we end up now. So I'm going to use these 6 by 1.25 stainless screws that I've used throughout the project. I'm using the stainless screws here instead of like a drywall screw, because in case any of them should break during removal, I want something I can leave in there. And I'm going to pre-drill through the mahogany. With this bit, it's probably a little larger than we're just about the same size as the shank. I'll just drill through the mahogany, and then I'll drive them in through the plywood for the threads to grab. So on my first screw, I pre-drilled and drove the screw in, and I didn't drive it too deep because I didn't want the bugle head to split the wood or anything, and it didn't pull it in as tightly as I wanted. So I took the screw out, and I'm going to run it with these washers. It's a 1-inch washer, and that way I can feel better about driving it in nice and tight. And this is now nice and tight against the hull without doing any damage to the wood, hopefully. Again, these are all going to be removed. On the inside, it's poked through just a little, and I've circled it just to make it easier for me to find that later and ream it out and fill it with epoxy. So I'll keep going in this way, just using probably every 12 inches or so. I want to make sure I have enough screws to hold this tightly, but no more than I need either, because I have to fix all the holes later. The second rail that will go over the top, that will be a different story, and we'll talk about that when I get to it. So having this end bent in all the way early on, it was bowing it out way too much amidships, and the last screw I drove, the second screw, did not pull this all the way in because it was just bowed out too much. So for now, I've gone ahead and just supported this on a ladder just to hold the end up so it isn't dangling out in space. Broke that screw. So in tightening the second screw, I just broke it, which is a real risk with these stainless screws. So that's causing me to reconsider what I'm using and also possibly pre-drill into the hull. But it's too early to break a screw off, so I'm going to take off this other screw and the clamps and whatever, and get this piece of wood off here and get that screw out. I don't want that in there. So I'm making progress here. I'm taking this slow because in addition to getting it secured in place in a way that doesn't damage anything, I also need to double check the fairness of this line. I'm just relying on my measured marks, which is fine, but ultimately I need to make sure it looks good and fair to the eye. And there's really no way to test it without screwing it in place. So I'm just going slowly. So far, found 30 inches between these screws is sufficient. That leaves me room for additional screws if I should need it when I actually epoxy this in place. But for now, it's nice and tight to the hull, certainly within epoxy range. And I don't want to go nuts with screws if I don't have to, but this leaves plenty of option for more. So that's where I am. I'm right at my line. I'm just eyeballing it to my marks and judging as I go what kind of spacing I can get away with on my screws. After I broke that screw off, I started pre-drilling into the hull as well with a slightly smaller bit. So I drill through the wood, drill through the hull with a smaller bit, and then install the screw very carefully until it's just tight. So here we are, the first piece on the port side is dry fit. Looks pretty good. It was no problem to follow the marks. And as I continually discover with this design, the way this piece of wood laid in is pretty much how it just wanted to go naturally. It didn't take a lot of extra work to bend it this way. It just kind of laid in flat to the hull as if it was its job. And this has to bend in two directions. Not only does it have to bend along the shape of the hull, but it also has to bend up towards the bow to create this sort of shear line. But it's not too extreme, and I didn't have any trouble getting it in there, and it's tight even with my minimal screw spacing, or maximal perhaps. These are 30 inches apart, roughly. If I need to during installation, I can put screws in the middle. Hopefully I won't need to. There's a few little gaps, very little. And like here, it's just at this bulkhead. I mean, we're not going to get this honestly, I want it to be fair, not pinched in abnormally. So I'm not too worried about the little gaps that do exist. What I'm just trying to assess now is that I like the curve and that it looks like it's supposed to look. And I think it does. From here, I'm going to mask off top and bottom because I want to minimize mess on this hull because this hull is all smooth and fair and I don't want to mess it up. So little masking is well worth the time. It'll also define exactly where I need to put the adhesive, and then we're golden. So I think this looks good. I'd love to get further away from it, but this is what we have. But it looks good to me. There's my gluing mix. It's 8 ounces of epoxy mixed with Cavicel until it's the consistency I want, which is pretty firm, but not so firm that it won't squeeze out easily. So this port side is now completely installed and cleaned up first round. From here, I'm going to pull this tape and then do a final wipe down. Make sure there's no stray epoxy anywhere. I did end up adding a few extra screws in between the originals in several locations on each half of the installation, just to pull it in a little bit more. Could have gotten away without them, but it definitely helped me pull it in. I just wanted to know that there's a good bed of epoxy in there. So it looks pretty good. It's pretty warm out today. We had 6 inches of snow overnight, and the ground is still well frozen outside the door, so I'm getting a good flood in here today. There's nothing I can do about it, so I've learned to live with it, but I've got a good melt drip going here, and you can see the water just builds up. There's nowhere for it to go. If the ground were softer, I'd dig a little trench, but the ground is not soft, it's frozen. It's an irritation, but I'm ready for it. I've got everything raised up, so it's just a nuisance. I'm going to cut this excess length off now so that I can do the other side. The other side will have to come by just like this, so I'll cut this off pretty close. So here's the port side all untaped, cleaned up. And we'll just leave this to cure overnight or longer. At which time I will pull all those screws and do this all over again with another piece. So on to the other side. So here is the starboard side, dry fit. Went more quickly than the other because I knew what I was doing and I had a system. Here at the bow, it's aligned with the marks and also with the piece on the port side. So that's nice to see. It's the way it should be. On this side, there's kind of a flat spot in the hull. Right in here between the two bulkheads. And there's a gap, quite a good sized gap in here. I don't know, I'm not really inclined to try and pull that in because it's going to make a big flat spot in the rail. And I don't think I can pull the hull out to it, which would be ideal. I think what I'm going to do there is let the rail be fair, and I'll put a real heavy amount of epoxy in that gap and fill it up and just let it rest the way it is. Otherwise, looks pretty good, same as the other side. I've really got a flood in here today from the melting outside. It's unfortunate timing because, I have some kneeling to do, so I'll use that cushion. It's not the end of the world. So here we are with this flood. I'm dealing with it. It's not my favorite thing. But I'll just let this gunnel run fair past that funny sort of flattish spot in the hull. There's another spot right here. This one I can pull in. I'll put some more screws in. And I don't think I drilled this is right, it happens to be right on this tabbing. So I don't think I drilled all the way through, so I think I could pull that in, but I'm being very careful not to over tighten these screws and break them. So let's get some tape on this and get this installed, because I want this to be done. Starboard side's now all masked up, ready for me to unfasten the forward end and get it epoxied in place. As I splash through the water here. Same process as on the other side. And here is the starboard side, inner rail, gunnel. It's now installed. Generally the same as on the port side, except for this spot here between the two bulkheads where I showed you earlier. A little gap. I just let the rail run fair across it and filled the gap with epoxy. It's all cleaned up. We'll leave it to cure overnight-ish. Hopefully the floor will dry out a little. And then we'll come back and do this all over again with the second piece. So there you have it. Gunnels, first layer in place. Next morning, and I've just removed the clamps and screws from this first layer of the gunnel. I took a second to just put some tape on the hull to show me where the scarf in the first piece is, so that I can strive to misalign them a little bit for the second piece. Process for these second boards is the same as the first, with a couple minor differences. First, I'm going to use these 1¼ pan head stainless steel screws. I like to use pan head in a situation like this because it helps hold it securely. And I'll be countersinking these for a bung using this 3/8 bit. And I've got a couple of drills to drill for the shank and for the threads. So it'll be a few more drilling processes to install these, but no big deal. So let's get to it. The forward half is now all glued in. I did end up putting a screw right here. It's right in the scarf, but that's okay. It's just above the scarf. And I needed it to pull this in. Otherwise, this was no problem. I didn't need any other screws. So I'll assess this later and see about drilling in some extra holes for bungs in between. Cut the end off so that I can bring the starboard side past. So my next task now is to repeat this process on the after half. And there's the after half of the port side. Second lamination, now completely installed with epoxy, screws, a couple clamps. So we'll just leave that alone, let it cure. We're going to move over and do the same thing on the starboard side now. So this is the process for each screw. At the mark, I bring it down 3/4 of an inch and make a cross mark. And that's halfway. This is 1.5 inches, so 3/4 of an inch down. This is my first screw on this side, so I've brought it forward 2 inches from the edge of the transom. Once I have that cross mark made, I use this 3/8 Forstner bit. This is a carbide bit to drill a cylindrical hole to that depth, and that'll accept the screw head and later a mahogany bung. So now I've got a bit, I'm not sure what size it is, just roughly the size of the screw shank with a piece of tape on it to show me how deep to go so that I don't drill more than 3/4 of an inch. I don't want to drill this size bit any deeper than through the outer piece of wood. And the final step is a smaller bit for the threads of the screw, and I'll bring this in. This basically goes just into the plywood at full depth. These are stainless steel self-tapping screws. They're not wood screws. They're not tapered. 316 stainless, number 8 by 1 1/4, and they need pre-drilling. There you have it. So we'll unclamp forward half and do this whole thing again. Starboard outer gunnel, now done, installed. Well, not done, but it's all installed. Screws and epoxy, cleaned up. Let that cure overnight and we'll get back to work on whatever, it and various other things. I had to put 1 or 2 extra screws in here and there just to pull the outer piece in tightly. Here's one of them. A couple up forward, no big deal. The epoxy is the main thing that holds this in place. It's the next day, and the first thing I did was go around and drill out any other screw holes that I didn't use during installation so that I can put a bung every 12 inches. And this way my bung spacing is nice and consistent visually, even if I end up covering this, which I probably will with a stainless half oval.